Hey guys, once again, this is Max Steinberg here with my brother Danny Steinberg. We're partners here at SaberSim, and we want to make a video on how to get started with mass multi-entries and tournaments, meaning how to make 20 or more lineups for a single contest. Now, I'm sure many of you watching this video may have some negative views on mass multi-entry. You might think, it's just way too complicated to do it. It's too complicated for me. Or you think, well, I like having control over my lineups. I want to just make a few so I can really make sure who I get. And if I make 20 more lineups, I just have no control. Or maybe you think it takes too much time. You might think it takes a huge bankroll. There's a lot of reasons that people have sort of a negative view of mass multi-entry. And while this might be the case for trying mass multi-entry, or what a lot of people refer to as MME, which is what we're going to refer to it as for the rest of this video. So this might be the case trying MME with a lot of lineup builders out there, but we're here to show you how using SaberSim can make MME easy, quick, and it's actually very, very, very profitable.
Yeah, very well said. So let's address bankroll concerns. So we touched on this in our building a bankroll video, which you can find on our YouTube channel. We actually think that mass multi-entering GPPs requires less of a bankroll than playing cash games. And this is because when you enter 20 plus lineups into a tournament, you actually mitigate risk by not placing all your eggs in one basket. So by spreading out the exposure of your players and having a wide variety of diversity in your lineups, you actually lower your risk every week while raising your chances of having a really big score. You can also experience much higher ROIs if you are disciplined and use proper game selection. So as tempting as they are, if you can avoid tournaments like the Million Maker and the Sunday Million, which are super high variance, and select tournaments that either limit the amount of entries people can have, like such as the 20 entry max play action, or exclude or limit experienced players entirely, any contest under $3, or one that exclusively says no experienced players allowed, you're going to be much more profitable. So this means your bankroll is likely to grow, and it's much more unlikely that you risk busting your bankroll by trying to grind a thinner edge in cash games. So again, if you want more information to build a bankroll, head over to our YouTube channel and you can watch our video on the subject.
Yeah, well said as well. So I think MME in general, one benefit is it's a lot more scalable than cash games. So when playing double ups or other cash games like that, the only way to get down more money is to move up stakes because there's only so much action you can get on each level. But with MME, you can actually play the same games you've always played, but increase the amount of lineups you create. If you get to the point where you can confidently build 150 lineups like Danny or I, suddenly you'll find that you can invest quite a bit of money playing DFS every week and generate some real cash on the side while exclusively playing the least risky and most profitable stakes. So let's talk about the other concern. Mass multi-entry takes too much time. To win at DFS today, you need to build high upside lineups that take advantage of correlations, ownership, and variance. Traditional lineup optimizers literally, by definition, optimize exclusively on average projected scores with no consideration at all for any of these components of upside.
Yeah, and if you're using a traditional optimizer, you really just have two options. One, you can use simple rules to save time, or you have to spend hours dialing in every single setting, which can be extremely time-consuming and frustrating. Simple rules may be easy to understand, but they're going to lead to poor results in suboptimal plays. And let me give you an example of that. So let's say we want to stack a QB with a pass-catching running back in order to take advantage of the correlation there. If we create a rule for this, just forcing a QB to be paired with a running back, we'll end up doing this with every situation. So while this may make a lot of sense for running back like Alvin Kamara, who catches a lot of passes and is going to be correlated to the QB. You can see Max pulling up that Bridgewater is 24% correlated with Kamara. It's going to make zero sense for a lot of other running backs, like, say, Mark Ingram, who scores almost all his fantasy points on the ground, and you can see has only a 5.05 correlation with Lamar Jackson. So when you're creating lineups this way with these rules, you're going to make a lot of suboptimal lineups.
Yeah, and then maybe, a lot of people, they attempt to account for ownership in GPP. It's very, very important trying to project how much a certain play will be owned in the GPP you're playing in, and possibly trying to fade them or avoid them given the situation. So what you could do to account for that is try to set a rule to avoid players in our lineups that are, for example, projected at 20% ownership or above. This is something that many people playing DFS will do in GPPs. But sometimes players like this are projected to be 20+% owned for a reason. They can be the best plays by far, even in a big field GPP. And so if we set a rule like this, we end up sometimes completely excluding some of the best plays on the slate, something that we really don't want to do. The only way to avoid this problem is to spend hours upon hours creating the perfect settings, like putting players into groups. I mean, all these optimizers have these different ways to do this. And it takes a long, long time. And then suddenly Sunday morning comes around, late breaking news comes out. Suddenly a running back is now the best play on the slate. You're going to have to start this entire process over from scratch. And even for pros, it's hard to find the time to do this. You have limited time sometimes. There's a time crunch before the game starts. And this is going to be especially hard for someone who's just doing this to make money on the side, that if you're not a pro.
Yeah. So, I mean, with these outdated optimizers, mass entering contests does take too much time. But with SaberSim, it's way different. Instead of making rules to take advantage of correlation and ownership and all the factors you want to consider in GPPs, we let you decide how much you like to take these things into account. And then we leverage our simulation data to build these lineups in the way you want. So what you will end up finding is that you end up getting the stacks, the game stack, the ownership leverage plays you want in every lineup without any of the tedious work.
Yeah, SaberSim makes it easy to build better lineups in less time. And in a second, I'll show you how SaberSim's lineup builder works and how you can actually start doing mass multi-entry on your own. I'll start by walking through how I built a set of lineups for a great contest to get started with, the 25-cent Hail Mary on FanDuel, which is this contest here. There's a similar contest on DraftKings called the Quarter Jukebox, but I actually literally cannot see it because I'm an experienced player. But it's a 20 entry max, and it's also 25 cents per entry. And it's another great tournament to get started with. In these contests, you can test the waters of mass multi-entry for only $5 without any of the top pros, and you still can win some real money. So let's take a look at SaberSim's lineup builder. For those of you who have used a traditional optimizer, this might look way, way too simple. But the reason we can simplify things is we can leverage our simulation data in a way that easily takes all of the important aspects of building a great GPP lineup into account. And all you have to do is worry about customizing the settings of the three main sliders. So we have our sliders here. And what we feel is most important in GPPs, as we talked about earlier, is taking advantage of correlation, playing off ownership, and diversifying your lineups in a way that is smart and takes into account upside. So let me just talk about the sliders here. So correlation, obviously that's something that we really, really want to take into consideration in our GPP lineups. And this means stacking our quarterback with receivers. This also can mean something like game stacking. And you can see if you look at an example of a player who is playing this week, let's say Alvin Kamara, you can see that he's correlated with his quarterback. He's also correlated with some players on the opposite team. And this is the reason that, or we can look at Patrick Mahomes too, as he's correlated with Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill. This is the reason why stacking is really important, is basically these correlations. And so if we take into account correlation at a high level, what's going to end up happening is the lineup builder is just going to naturally get us these stacks that we want and take that correlation into account. So there's no need for rules, but if you're playing a GVP where correlation and getting those stacks are important, you're going to want to set the setting to a very, very high setting. So usually I set this about 2 from the top. Ownership fade. This really depends on the contest you're playing in. And given that we're playing a low stakes contest and I haven't made my own ownership adjustments, which I might make off of maybe like buzz or something I'm reading on Twitter, I'm probably going to set this to a pretty low thing, just considered just a bit. And the reason is because we're playing a low stakes contest. We're hopeful that the best plays are actually not going to really be high owned, and people are going to not be playing in a very smart way. So I don't think we have to consider this as much. When you move up to stakes like the Millionaire Maker and the Sunday Million, this is where you're going to want to really focus on perfecting those ownership projections, perfecting your own projections, and you can set this to a lot higher. And then smart diversity. I actually touched on this in another video on our YouTube channel, which, by the way, has a lot of great content. But it's essentially our way of diversifying your lineups in a way that also takes into account upside. It's really, really cool. If you want to learn more about it, you can consult our YouTube page and watch this video. But for now, just you can trust me that you want to just set the setting to a pretty high setting, because we do want the diversification in our lineups. And we want to be able to, lower variance like we talked about earlier. And so now I'm going to just start building our lineups, and I'll pass it on to Danny to just talk about this a little more.
So SaberSim gives you a lot of control after the build is over, while keeping the integrity of the lineups we're creating for you. So this is because with traditional optimizers, when you request 20 lineups, they'll make you 20 lineups. But with SaberSim, we actually build you much more lineups. If you ask for 20 lineups, we'll build you a pool of 1,000 lineups and give you the 20 best lineups out of that larger pool, allowing you to control the exposures of individual players or stacks very quickly without having to rerun your build. So this is important because we want to have flexibility and control once our lineups are built. Otherwise, with a traditional optimizer, we'll have to continually adjust and readjust our projections, and then you rerun the build. And then if that build's not right, you have to readjust your projections again. And it's an incredibly annoying process. But, and I love this about SaberSim, because our builder creates a large pool of lineups, you can easily swap in and out the kind of lineups you want to have in your portfolio without having to rebuild your lineups again and again. So now that we've built our pool of lineups, it's time for what I call the quality control part of the process. So SaberSim gives you a great visual of not only the players we're getting in our lineups, but also the team stacks, game stacks, and player stacks distributed through our lineups, as Max is showing you on the screen.
Yeah, and you'll hear a lot of daily fantasy tournament pros talking about having quote unquote shares of players in their lineups. And this is because many players look at their lineups as a portfolio that they're investing into GPPs. And like any good portfolio, we want to have a diversification of great investments to ensure that our lineups profit the most while mitigating our risk. And this is how you should be looking at these percentages, whether it's a player, team, or game. We want to make sure we're getting to the right exposure to the right players and stacks without risking too much in one area. So let's say, for example, I want a little more of Dalvin Cook in my lineup. All you have to do is adjust them in exposure. Let's say instead of we have them about 10% of our lineup, so 2 out of our 20, we want to get them in 4 of our lineups. All you have to do is adjust them in exposure, and suddenly he will appear in 4 of our lineups, and that happens instantaneously.
I know, this process almost seems like magic to me when I do it.
Right.
It's just like, well, what happened? How do we now have Dalvin Cook more?
Right. So you can do the same thing with team stacks, and you can do the same thing with game stacks, and you can do the same thing with stack types. So for example, let's say I kind of want to cap the exposure that I'm getting to a particular game stack because I just want more of a spread. I think game stacking is really important, and I'd like to spread it out. We can just cap the max exposure to these game stacks, and suddenly we're getting a wider variety of game stacks in our lineup and spreading this out more and more in a way that's, going to keep the profitability of your lineups, because game stacking in and of itself is already going to give you an edge when you're making GPP lineups, but you're just going to get a wider variety. You're not going to be sacrificing that much expected value from these lineups, but you're going to get a wider variety of game stacks. We're stacking 6 out of the 10 games of the slate, and that's going to really lower your variance and increase your odds of actually, having a big score in a GPP. You can do this with team stacks as well. Maybe you want more exposure to Cleveland and you don't want to worry about individual players. You can adjust this there. Maybe you want to look at the players more and maybe you see someone like Steph Diggs that you like for a particular reason. You can, basically just raise it in exposure. You have basically just so much control and such like an easy and quick amount of control that you're just that literally just do not have with other lineup builders. And if you look at this, actually, what ends up happening is, remember we're talking about when we're doing this, a lot of lineup optimizers, what you're going to do is go, make a rule, and you're going to say, oh, I want a quarterback with 2 receivers, or I want a game stack, or things like that. And if you actually look at this, we are just simply by using these slider settings, which was the simplest process in the world, right. You actually have every lineup has a stack. I think if I'm calculating this correctly, every lineup has a game stack, almost every lineup. You have a wide variety of teams you're stacking. You have 56 total players that you're using. And by the way, you can cap exposures here too. You can say, I just want 50% Le'Veon Bell. I want 30% of the Redskins D. You just have so much control here. And all you had to do was literally set some sliders. And by the way, we actually sort of do this for you anyway by giving you some default settings to go by, but you can switch them back however you like. And what ends up happening is you have some really great lineups, and you can actually just look through them and say, okay, do I like this? And it's like, look, okay, this is actually just a beautiful lineup. We have Houston, we have Deshaun Watson stacking with Duke Johnson, who's a pass-catching running back, who's going to be correlated to him, DeAndre Hopkins. We bring it back with both Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Oh, he has Will Fuller too, by the way. So this is a massive game stack of a really high over-under game. And you look down again, you have another Patrick Mahomes. We now have a Jacksonville stack with Michael Thomas. So here's another game stack. You're getting just a wide variety of lineups, and you check it out and see, okay, do these lineups look good? And I think you'll find, wow, they do.
I just want to reiterate that point you're making. Max didn't make any stacking rules. We're just creating the optimal lineups, and they happen to be stacks. We're doing all that for you. He didn't have to make all these tedious rules of who to stack on what team. We're doing all that work for you, and we're doing it so much better than if you set stacking rules on your own.
Yeah, and I think, there's some nuance here that, make things a lot different. Like, for example, we were just showing you Patrick Mahomes lineups, and we were talking earlier in the first part of this video of, stacking a quarterback with 3, or stacking a quarterback with a running back, as you saw with this, or different stacking rules that you can make. And you can see that this is just a much nuanced approach. Like, if we set a stacking rule for Cincinnati and we said, okay, or we just set a stacking rule and we said, we want a quarterback with 3 receivers always because I really want that correlation. And by the way, we're making quite a bit of lineups like that. That would do the same thing with Andy Dalton, which would just be really foolish. You do not want to stack 3 players with Andy Dalton, but you do want to stack Tyler Boyd with Andy Dalton. And you do want a game stack maybe a bit here by bringing it back with someone like Mark Andrews on the other team. So there's just a lot more nuance here that you're going to get and if you use the stacking rule, it just wouldn't work. Yeah. So, this whole process with explaining this to you pretty completely took about 15 minutes. And it's actually that easy. Mass multi-entry with SaberSim is not that hard. And there's a lot of great contests that you can make really good money on the side playing mass multi-entry with them. And once you start to figure out how to use this lineup builder, suddenly you can raise the amount of lineups you're creating pretty easily. You can start making 50 lineups or even 150. And it's a great way to expand the money that you're putting down and raise the money that you're making from week to week. So hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something from this. MME is a great way to make money playing daily fantasy. And SaberSim makes it easy. So, we're offering a 3-day free trial. So try us out, start on Friday, mess around with the lineup builder for a while, see what you're creating, see the lineups you create, and then try entering them into one of these small stakes contests and see how you do. And you can literally do that for free. So you really have nothing to lose trying us out. I really recommend it. We are the best lineup builder in the business. So again, hope you enjoyed this video and good luck this weekend.